Elvis Presley was already learning the most painful lesson of fame when Marilyn Monroe was still smiling for cameras she secretly feared. The lesson was simple and cruel. The louder the world cheers, the harder it becomes to hear your own heart. In the 1950s, America crowned its idols quickly and consumed them even faster, and no two figures embodied that truth more completely than Elvis, Presley, and Marilyn Monroe. Their story is not about a romance that happened, but about a connection that never had the chance to exist, buried under schedules, contracts, expectations, and a culture that turned human beings into symbols before they could protect themselves from the cost. By the time Elvis first saw Marilyn Monroe on screen, she was already more than a woman. She was an idea carefully designed by studios, photographers, and publicists who understood the power of illusion. To the world, Marilyn was laughter, curves, innocence, and desire wrapped into one glowing figure. To Elvis, she was something far more dangerous. She was proof that fame did not equal happiness, that being adored did not mean being understood, and that even the brightest smile could hide a life shaped by fear and loneliness. Elvis grew up poor, shy, and deeply attached to his mother, and his sudden rise to stardom left him emotionally unprepared for the isolation that followed. Crowds screamed his name, yet personal relationships became harder, not easier. Every move was watched. Every friendship was filtered through managers and security. Elvis understood, earlier than most, that fame could lock you inside a golden cage. When he looked at Marilyn, he didn't see temptation alone. He saw a reflection of what he was becoming, and what he feared becoming permanently. Marilyn Monroe's journey to the top had already been marked by abandonment, insecurity, and exploitation long before Elvis recorded his first hit. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, she spent her early years drifting between foster homes, never forming stable attachments. Hollywood offered her visibility, but not safety. Studios reshaped her voice, her walk, her image, and even her name. By the time she became the most photographed woman in the world, she had learned how to perform happiness while privately struggling with anxiety, depression, and a constant fear of being discarded. What made the idea of Elvis and Marilyn so powerful was not proximity, but parallel experience. They were icons of opposite energies. Elvis, raw and rebellious, challenging social norms through sound and movement. Marilyn, soft and luminous, reinforcing fantasy while quietly suffering beneath it. Yet both were owned by industries that measured success and profit, not well-being. Both were surrounded by people who needed them productive, desirable, and controlled. And both were slowly realizing that the price of being loved by millions was the loss of a normal life. There is no verified evidence that Elvis and Marilyn ever shared a private relationship or even a meaningful conversation. Historians and biographers remain cautious because Hollywood in that era thrived on rumor, exaggeration, and myth-making. But what is documented, through interviews and testimonies, is Elvis's admiration for Marilyn as a person who symbolized vulnerability rather than conquest. He spoke of her with respect, not ownership. He understood her fragility because he recognized the same cracks forming within himself. Marilyn, for her part, existed in a world where association itself could be dangerous. Any public connection risked becoming a headline, a scandal, or a marketing strategy. Her relationships were monitored, judged, and often weaponized against her. Love was rarely private, and privacy was rarely permitted. Even if curiosity or mutual understanding existed between her and Elvis, the machinery around them ensured that nothing simple could ever remain untouched by public expectation. Fame did not bring Elvis closer to people. It pushed him further away. The same was true for Marilyn. Their worlds were loud, fast-moving, and suffocating, leaving little space for vulnerability. They were young, emotionally exposed, and carrying the weight of cultural projection, far heavier than their years suggested. The idea that two such figures could meet freely, without consequence, was almost impossible in an industry designed to prevent authenticity. This is where their story truly begins, not with a meeting, but with a distance created not by lack of desire, but by excessive attention, a space where possibility existed only in theory, while reality enforced separation. Elvis and Marilyn were never denied each other by indifference. They were denied by the very fame that made them eternal. And as the decade moved forward, that fame would demand more from both of them than either fully understood at the time. Elvis Presley entered the late 1950s with a growing awareness that success was no longer something he controlled, but something that controlled him. His image was carefully managed, his schedule tightly sealed, and his personal life increasingly treated as a liability rather than a human necessity. While the public saw confidence and charisma, Elvis privately struggled with trust, dependence, and a deep need for emotional safety. This internal conflict shaped the way he viewed other celebrities, especially those who seemed trapped inside their fame rather than empowered by it. Marilyn Monroe was one of the few people he believed truly understood that trap. Marilyn's public image during this period was at its peak, but her private life was unraveling. Studio pressure intensified as her box office value grew, and her mistakes were punished more harshly than her successes were rewarded. She was expected to remain eternally youthful, desirable, and compliant, while being denied the respect granted to serious actors. Marilyn wanted legitimacy, creative control, and emotional stability, yet Hollywood offered her performance roles both on and off the screen. Her smile became armor, and the world applauded the armor without ever asking what it protected. Elvis watched Hollywood from the outside, but he was not immune to its influence. As his career expanded beyond music into film, he began to experience the same mechanisms that had shaped Marilyn's life. Scripts were chosen for marketability, not meaning. Decisions were made by men who measured success in numbers rather than fulfillment. Elvis felt himself being slowly molded into a product, and this realization deepened his empathy for Marilyn. She was not just a star to him, she was evidence of where his own path could lead. What separated them was not just distance, but structure. Their lives were governed by contracts, handlers, and publicists whose job was to eliminate risk. Any association between two massive icons carried potential consequences. Rivalry narratives, moral panic, or exploitation by the press. In an era obsessed with appearances, even innocent admiration could be framed as scandal. The safest option was distance, and safety often outweighed sincerity. Marilyn's relationships during this time reflected her longing for validation and stability. Her marriages, friendships, and professional partnerships were frequently intense but short-lived, shaped by imbalance and expectation. She gave deeply, often too deeply, to people who either wanted to control her or could not fully support her fragility. Elvis, observing from afar, recognized this pattern. He had seen it in his own life, where loyalty was confused with dependence and affection with obligation. Despite their fame, both Elvis and Marilyn struggled with identity. Elvis was unsure where the performer ended and the person began. Marilyn felt the same fracture, intensified by years of being told she was valuable only when desired. Their shared vulnerability created a silent bond, one that did not require proximity to exist. It existed in recognition, in understanding, and in the unspoken acknowledgement that fame could be emotionally devastating. There were moments when their worlds came close enough to touch. Industry events, overlapping social circles, shared acquaintances, but timing never aligned. Each was surrounded by people, yet isolated by expectation. Even a brief meeting could have been misinterpreted, exaggerated, or manipulated. In Hollywood, reality rarely survived contact with narrative. For two figures already burdened by myth, privacy was nearly impossible. Elvis's admiration for Marilyn was cautious, restrained by his awareness of consequences. He knew that approaching her would not be simple, and that any gesture could invite scrutiny. Marilyn similarly had learned that curiosity often led to pain. She was tired of being observed, analyzed, and possessed by strangers, the idea of another public. Attachment may have felt less like opportunity and more like threat. Their story during this period is defined by restraint rather than action. It is a reminder that not all powerful connections are physical, and not all love stories require a beginning to be meaningful. Sometimes understanding is enough to create attachment, and sometimes distance is the only form of protection available. Elvis and Marilyn existed on parallel tracks, close enough to recognize each other, yet too constrained to converge. As the decade continued, the pressures on both would intensify. Fame would demand more compliance, more sacrifice, and more silence. The distance between them would remain, not because it lacked emotional truth, but because the world around them refused to allow truth without spectacle. And in that refusal, something fragile and human was quietly lost. The end of the 1950s. The cost of being Elvis Presley was becoming clearer with each passing year. The boy from Tupelo who once sang with unguarded emotion was now surrounded by systems designed to protect the brand, rather than the man. His manager controlled access, media narratives, and long-term strategy with an iron grip, believing that emotional distance was necessary for commercial survival. Elvis sensed that something essential was slipping away, yet he lacked the power or clarity to stop it. Fame rewarded obedience, not honesty. Marilyn Monroe was facing a similar erosion of self, though her struggle unfolded under a harsher microscope. As a woman in Hollywood, her worth was constantly negotiated through appearance, behavior, and compliance. Each attempt to assert independence was met with resistance, punishment, or ridicule. She wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, but seriousness threatened the fantasy that made her profitable. The more she fought for control, the more isolated she became, and isolation magnified her existing. Insecurities. Elvis's increasing exposure to Hollywood deepened his understanding of Marilyn's predicament. Film sets taught him that the illusion of glamour masked rigid hierarchies and emotional neglect. He was expected to deliver charm, discipline, and predictability, while his inner life remained irrelevant to the machine. Marilyn had been navigating this reality for years, and Elvis recognized the exhaustion it produced. Her struggles were not weakness. They were the result of prolonged pressure, applied to a vulnerable human being. Both icons were surrounded by people who depended on them financially. This created a dangerous imbalance, where honesty was discouraged and emotional needs were inconvenient. Elvis often questioned whether those around him cared for his well-being or merely his output. Marilyn faced the same doubt, intensified by a culture that viewed emotional expression as instability rather than pain. In such an environment, trust became rare, and intimacy felt risky. The idea of Elvis and Marilyn connecting on a personal level was complicated by this climate of suspicion. Even if curiosity or mutual understanding existed, approaching one another would have required vulnerability in a world that punished exposure. Every interaction risked becoming public property, reshaped into narrative and spectacle. For Marilyn, whose life had already been defined by misinterpretation, this risk was especially heavy. Elvis admired Marilyn's courage in a quiet, restrained way. He saw her attempts to break free from typecasting, to study acting seriously, and to claim autonomy in an industry that preferred her silent and smiling. These efforts resonated with his own desire to be more than a caricature. Yet admiration did not translate into action. The structures around them were designed to prevent unsanctioned connections, particularly those that could disrupt carefully managed images. Marilyn's mental and emotional health began to deteriorate more visibly. During this period, insomnia, anxiety, and dependency on medication became part of her daily reality. Rather than receiving compassion, she was labeled difficult and unreliable. The industry that profited from her vulnerability showed little interest in addressing its causes. Elvis, observing from a distance, recognized the cruelty in this response. He understood how easily sensitivity could be weaponized against someone once their productivity faltered. Despite the similarities in their experiences, their coping mechanisms differed. Elvis retreated inward, relying on familiar faces and controlled environments. Marilyn sought reassurance through relationships, hoping to find stability where the industry provided none. Both approaches carried risks, and both reflected the absence of genuine support. Fame had isolated them differently, but the result was the same: a growing sense of emotional homelessness. There were no dramatic encounters, no secret meetings that history can confirm. What existed instead was a shared awareness, a recognition shaped by parallel suffering. This awareness did not need expression to be real. It lived in observation, in respect, and in the unspoken, understanding that their worlds were not built for human connection. As the cultural landscape shifted and expectations intensified, the space between Elvis and Marilyn remained intact. It was not maintained by indifference, but by survival. Each was fighting to preserve a fragment of self in an environment that demanded constant performance. The tragedy of their story lies not in what they lost together, but in what they were never allowed to explore. Fame stood between them, not as a dramatic antagonist, but as a quiet, persistent force that reshaped every choice before it was ever made. As the 1960s approached, the cultural environment around Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe hardened into something less forgiving and far more demanding. America still celebrated them, but the celebration had become conditional. Success now required consistency, obedience, and silence. For Elvis, this meant being steered away from artistic risk and personal exploration, pushed instead towards safe films and controlled appearances. For Marilyn, it meant being punished for fragility, while being expected to remain endlessly desirable. The systems that elevated them had no tolerance for deviation, and both felt the tightening grip Elvis's career decisions. During this period, increasingly reflected compromise rather than passion. His manager prioritized financial security and mass appeal, often dismissing Elvis's creative instincts as dangerous or impractical. This erosion of agency affected Elvis deeply. He was aware that his voice, image, and future were no longer entirely his own. Watching Marilyn struggle publicly while facing similar, if quieter, restrictions reinforced his belief that fame was not freedom, but a trade. Marilyn's attempt to reclaim control took the form of resistance. She challenged studios, sought better roles, and demanded respect that had long been denied. Instead of being rewarded, she was labeled unstable and unprofessional. Her delays were scrutinized, her illnesses doubted, and her emotional pain trivialized. Hollywood treated her vulnerability as inconvenience, ignoring the years of pressure that had produced it. Elvis, seeing these narratives unfold, understood how easily admiration could turn into condemnation. The distance between Elvis and Marilyn was reinforced by fear. Fear of scandal, fear of misinterpretation, fear of losing what little autonomy remained. Any potential interaction carried weight beyond personal interest. A simple meeting could spark rumors, power struggles, or moral panic in an era obsessed with image. The safest path was separation, and safety was often chosen over authenticity. Both icons were also navigating the challenge of trust. Surrounded by employees, associates, and admirers, they struggled to distinguish genuine concern from self-interest. Elvis became increasingly insulated, relying on familiar faces and routines that offered comfort but limited growth. Marilyn oscillated between craving closeness and withdrawing from it, unsure whether connection would heal or harm her. In this environment, vulnerability felt dangerous rather than healing. The media played a central role in maintaining this barrier. Gossip columns and tabloids thrived on speculation, turning private pain into public entertainment. Marilyn was a frequent target, her struggles exaggerated and stripped of context. Elvis, though treated differently, was also reduced to an image, his complexity flattened into myth. Both were aware that the press did not report reality. It manufactured it. This awareness further discouraged unscripted interaction. Elvis's respect for Marilyn deepened as her challenges became more visible. He did not see her as broken, but as exhausted. He recognized the toll of constant performance, the loneliness of being admired but not understood. This recognition was quiet, internal, and never acted upon publicly. It remained part of his private understanding of what fame demanded and destroyed. Marilyn, meanwhile, was reaching a critical point. Her attempts to balance personal needs with professional obligations were failing under relentless pressure. She sought therapy, intellectual engagement, and meaningful work, yet was continually pulled back into a role she was trying to escape. The contradiction between who she was expected to be and who she wanted to become created a fracture that grew harder to manage. Their parallel struggles highlight a central truth of their story. Proximity does not guarantee connection. Elvis and Marilyn occupied the same cultural moment, faced similar constraints, and shared unspoken understanding. Yet the structures around them prevented meaningful convergence. Their lives were choreographed by forces that valued consistency over humanity. As the decade progressed, the emotional cost of compliance became undeniable. Elvis felt increasingly disconnected from his instincts, Marilyn from her sense of worth. The space between them remained unchanged. Not because it lacked potential, but because potential itself was considered a liability. Fame demanded distance, and distance became survival. In that survival, something profoundly human was postponed indefinitely, leaving behind a story defined not by what happened, but by what was systematically denied. By the early 1960s, the illusion surrounding both Elvis, Presley, and Marilyn Monroe was beginning to fracture in ways the public could no longer ignore. Success still surrounded them, but it no longer protected them. For Elvis, the excitement that once defined his career had been replaced by routine. Films were released, records sold, appearances were made, yet fulfillment remained absent. He felt increasingly distant from the raw energy that had made him famous, and this emotional numbness shaped how he viewed fame itself. Marilyn, meanwhile, was reaching a point where the weight of expectation had become physically and psychologically unbearable. Elvis's internal conflict intensified as he realized how little control he had over his own direction. The people managing his career believed stability mattered more than growth. Risk was discouraged, and emotional expression was viewed as weakness. Elvis complied, but compliance carried resentment. Watching Marilyn be publicly criticized for resisting similar control only confirmed his fear. Pushing back came at a cost he was not sure he could pay. Marilyn's life during this period reflected a relentless cycle of hope and disappointment. Each new project represented a chance to redefine herself, yet the industry's response remained conditional. When she complied, she was praised. When she struggled, she was punished. Her emotional health continued to decline, exacerbated by isolation and dependence on medication prescribed without long-term consideration. Instead of being supported, she was monitored. Instead of being understood, she was managed. Elvis followed these developments with growing unease. He recognized the pattern because he lived within it. Fame rewarded silence and punished vulnerability. Marilyn's pain was not a personal failure. It was a predictable outcome of prolonged exploitation. Elvis understood this instinctively, even if he lacked the language to articulate it publicly. His admiration for her was rooted in empathy, not fantasy. The idea of connection between them became increasingly unrealistic as their circumstances grew more restrictive. Elvis's world narrowed into controlled environments, familiar faces, and carefully structured days. Marilyn's world became chaotic, marked by uncertainty, emotional swings, and constant scrutiny. Even if opportunity existed, the emotional capacity to pursue it may not have. Both were surviving rather than living. Public narratives during this time distorted reality further. Marilyn was portrayed as unreliable, volatile, and difficult, labels that ignored the systemic pressures shaping her behavior. Elvis was depicted as comfortable and secure, a portrayal that masked his growing dissatisfaction and dependency. These narratives reinforced distance, making genuine understanding even harder to achieve. When truth is replaced by image, intimacy becomes nearly impossible. Despite their differences, both icons shared a deep sense of being misunderstood. Elvis struggled with the gap between who he was and who he was expected to be. Marilyn lived entirely within that gap. This shared experience created a silent alignment, a recognition that did not require contact to exist. It was enough to know that someone else carried the same burden. As Marilyn's struggles intensified, the industry's response grew colder. Patience diminished, and empathy was replaced by calculation. Her value was reassessed through productivity rather than humanity. Elvis observed this shift and internalized its warning. He understood that fame's loyalty was conditional, and that even the most beloved figures could be abandoned once they became inconvenient. The tragedy of their story during this phase is not marked by dramatic confrontation, but by gradual erosion. Opportunities narrowed, emotional reserves depleted. The possibility of connection faded not through rejection, but through exhaustion. Elvis and Marilyn were not choosing distance. Distance was being imposed by circumstances beyond their control. By this point, fame no longer felt like achievement to either of them. It felt like obligation. The applause continued, but it carried no comfort. For Elvis, Marilyn represented a truth he was not ready to face fully, that unchecked success could hollow a person out. For Marilyn, the world offered little relief, only continued demand. The space between them remained intact, not because it lacked meaning, but because meaning had become a luxury neither could afford. By 1962, the contrast between public admiration and private collapse had become impossible to ignore, especially in Marilyn Monroe's life. The world still saw her as a symbol of desire, but behind closed doors, she was fighting exhaustion, loneliness, and a sense that time was running out. Hollywood had little patience for fragility, and Marilyn's need for care was increasingly treated as defiance. Every delay, every breakdown, every moment of vulnerability was cataloged as proof that she was a problem rather than a person. Elvis Presley, meanwhile, was entering a phase of quiet confinement. Though his name remained powerful, his artistic freedom continued to shrink. Film after film followed predictable formulas, and his musical instincts were routinely suppressed in favor of commercial safety. Elvis sensed that his career had stalled creatively, even as it succeeded financially. The more controlled his environment became, the more distant he felt from his own identity. Fame was no longer thrilling. It was repetitive and isolating. What connected Elvis and Marilyn most during this period was not interaction, but awareness. Elvis was not blind to Marilyn's public struggles. He saw how quickly admiration turned into judgment, how the same industry that once protected her now distanced itself. This observation reinforced his growing distrust of the system surrounding him. He understood that Marilyn's suffering was not sudden or mysterious. It was the result of years spent suppressing pain to meet impossible expectations. Marilyn's attempts to slow down or step away were met with resistance. Rest was interpreted as unreliability and emotional honesty as instability. The pressure to perform did not diminish with her success. It intensified. She was expected to be endlessly available, endlessly beautiful, and endlessly grateful. Any deviation from this script was treated as betrayal. Elvis recognized this cruelty because he lived within a milder version of it, one that still denied him the right to be fully human. The idea that Elvis and Marilyn might have found comfort in one another becomes more tragic. When viewed through this lens, it was not that opportunity never existed, but that the conditions required for healthy connection were absent. Both were surrounded by people, yet starved for understanding. Both were managed rather than supported. Any potential bond would have required honesty, time, and privacy, 3 things fame actively destroyed. Media narratives during this time grew increasingly harsh toward Marilyn. Sympathy was replaced by ridicule and concern by impatience. The public consumed her image while rejecting her reality. Elvis observed this shift and internalized its warning. He understood that popularity was conditional and temporary, and that once an icon disrupted comfort, the world would turn away. This realization deepened his emotional caution and reinforced his tendency toward withdrawal. Marilyn's isolation became more pronounced as trust eroded. She struggled to believe that anyone valued her beyond what she represented. Relationships felt unstable, professional alliances fragile. Therapy offered insight but could not counteract the relentless external pressure. The industry demanded consistency from someone whose life had been defined by instability since childhood. Elvis, aware of her background, understood that her pain was cumulative, not sudden. Elvis's own coping mechanisms grew more rigid. He relied on routine, familiar environments, and controlled interactions to maintain a sense of safety. While this protected him from chaos, it also limited growth. He felt emotionally contained, aware that deviation could invite consequences. Watching Marilyn suffer for expressing vulnerability confirmed his belief that survival required restraint, even if restraint meant emotional numbness. Their story during this phase is shaped by inevitability rather than choice. 2 people, emotionally aligned through shared experience, were prevented from meaningful connection by systems that prioritized profit and image over well-being. Fame did not merely separate them physically. It reshaped their emotional capacities, narrowing what felt possible or safe. By the time Marilyn's struggles reached their most critical point, Elvis was already deeply aware of what fame could cost. He did not need proximity to understand her pain. Recognition was enough. The tragedy is not that they failed to meet, but that the environment they inhabited made meeting irrelevant. Both were already casualties of the same machine. As history moved forward, Marilyn's life approached its devastating conclusion, while Elvis continued on a path of controlled success and private dissatisfaction. The space between them remained unchanged, a symbol of what fame forbids rather than what love denies. Their parallel suffering stands as a reminder that the greatest barriers are often invisible, enforced not by distance or disinterest, but by systems that reward silence and punish humanity. By mid-1962, Marilyn Monroe's life had reached a point where survival itself required constant effort. The image that once guaranteed protection now worked against her. Hollywood no longer saw vulnerability as something to manage, but as something to avoid. She was no longer a rising star whose fragility could be forgiven. She was a risk. Every missed call, every delayed shoot, every visible crack in her composure was treated as evidence that she had failed. The role assigned to her by the industry. The role was not acting. The role was obedience. Elvis Presley watched these developments from within his own controlled world, and the lesson was impossible to miss. Marilyn was being slowly abandoned by the same system that had once built her. Elvis understood that fame was loyal only when it was convenient. He had always feared what would happen when his usefulness declined or when he resisted too openly. Marilyn's situation confirmed that fear. The industry did not rescue those who struggled under its weight. It distanced itself from them. At this stage, Elvis's admiration for Marilyn had transformed into something quieter and heavier. It was no longer curiosity or distant fascination. It was recognition of inevitability. He saw how her sensitivity, the very quality that made her magnetic, had become her liability. Elvis knew that his own emotional depth was also something the system preferred he suppress. He complied more often than he resisted, not because he lacked awareness, but because resistance seemed to guarantee isolation. Marilyn's final year was marked by contradiction. She still dreamed of meaningful work, of stability, of being valued beyond appearance. Yet her body and mind were exhausted. Medication had become a coping mechanism rather than treatment, and trust in those around her had eroded. She was surrounded by professionals, yet deeply alone. The world expected gratitude from someone who had been giving everything she had for years. Elvis, by contrast, was insulated but confined. His life was orderly, predictable, and emotionally muted. He had people around him at all times, but intimacy was rare. He understood Marilyn's loneliness not because he lived the same chaos, but because he felt the same emptiness. Fame had removed spontaneity from his life, turning every choice into a calculation. Where Marilyn's pain was visible, his was hidden behind discipline and routine. There is no historical evidence that Elvis reached out to Marilyn during her final months, and this absence speaks volumes. Reaching out would have required vulnerability, risk, and the possibility of public interpretation. In an environment that punished emotional exposure, silence often felt safer than sincerity. This was not indifference. It was self-preservation shaped by fear. When Marilyn Monroe died in August 1962, the world reacted with shock, sorrow, and speculation. Headlines focused on mystery and scandal, while the deeper truth was simpler and more devastating. She had been exhausted by a system that demanded perfection without offering protection. Elvis received the news like everyone else, through distance, filtered by media, yet the impact was personal. Marilyn's death was not just the loss of an icon, it was a warning realized. For Elvis, Marilyn's fate confirmed what he had long suspected. Fame does not save you when you need saving. It replaces care with attention and understanding with consumption. Her death reinforced his emotional caution and deepened his mistrust of the world that profited from him. He retreated further into controlled spaces, carrying the knowledge that success offered no immunity from collapse. Marilyn's absence created a silence that lingered. She became a symbol of tragedy, her humanity once again reduced to narrative. Elvis understood the cruelty of that transformation. He knew how easily complexity could be erased, how quickly pain could be turned into legend. Marilyn's life, stripped of nuance, became another product, consumed long after she was gone. Part 7 of their story is not about connection achieved, but about connection foreclosed. Marilyn's death ended any remaining possibility, turning distance into permanence. Elvis survived, but survival came with its own cost. He carried forward the lesson she left behind, that fame demands everything and gives back very little when the applause fades. As history moved on, Marilyn became immortal in memory, frozen in time. Elvis continued living, aging under the same spotlight. One became a warning through loss, the other through endurance. Fame stood between them until the end. And in Marilyn's death, that barrier became absolute. What remained was not a love story, but a shared truth written in different endings. The world remembers Marilyn Monroe and Elvis. Presley as icons, brilliant, magnetic, larger than life. But beneath the sparkle, both carried the quiet weight of isolation, the private cost of being adored by millions. For Elvis, the lesson was painfully clear after Marilyn's death in 1962. Admiration and fame could never replace human understanding. Her absence was a mirror reflecting what he had always feared, the fragility of connection when the machinery of celebrity dictates every move. Elvis's life after Marilyn's passing became a study in containment. Marilyn's death was not only personal tragedy, but cultural caution. It demonstrated the consequences of a system that prizes image over individuality, profitability over humanity. For Elvis, it validated what he had long suspected. Fame isolates the people it elevates. It creates proximity without intimacy, visibility without understanding. His admiration for Marilyn had never been possessive. It had been empathetic, rooted in the recognition of shared pressures and silent suffering. Yet the world they inhabited denied any possibility of authentic human connection. Even in the aftermath, Elvis carried this lesson silently. He became more protective of his inner world, more selective with whom he allowed into it. Fame had proven itself a double-edged sword. It offered visibility and adoration, but it also extracted a toll measured in emotional distance, mistrust, and missed opportunity. Marilyn's life and death embodied that truth in ways that no public statement or interview could adequately convey. History has mythologized both of them, emphasizing glamour and allure while obscuring the subtler realities of their existence. Marilyn is remembered for her beauty and charisma, Elvis for his talent and charm, yet beneath these layers, their parallel loneliness speaks volumes. They were human beings navigating a machine that valued spectacle over substance, narrative over nuance, and audience consumption over personal connection. What makes their story haunting is not drama or scandal, it is absence. The profound what-if that lingers is not invented, It is based on observable patterns of life and work. Two people, aware of each other, aligned in experience, yet separated by fame itself. They never met in a way that allowed emotional truth to exist. They never connected because the world demanded they perform before it would allow them to be human. In the years following Marilyn's death, Elvis's own trajectory continued to reflect the influence of that loss. He sought stability in family and routine, yet remained subject to the pressures that had shaped his early career. His awareness of Marilyn's fragility informed his approach to relationships and fame, instilling caution and a deep understanding of the cost of public scrutiny. Every performance, every recording, carried echoes of what he had witnessed, the vulnerability of brilliance under unrelenting observation. Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley shared no romantic history, no documented friendship, no recorded moment of personal intimacy. What they shared was recognition, the silent acknowledgement that living under constant gaze is a unique form of loneliness. Fame, not circumstance, stood between them. Desire, empathy, and mutual understanding were never enough to overcome the machinery that defined their lives. The final truth of their story is both tragic and illuminating. Fame amplified their talents, preserved their images, and etched them into cultural memory. But it denied them connection. In Marilyn, Elvis saw the consequences of that denial. In himself, he felt the ongoing burden. Their story teaches that visibility does not equate to intimacy, and admiration does not replace understanding. Elvis and Marilyn remain immortal, not because they conquered love or life, but because they survived under conditions that would have crushed anyone less resilient. Yet within that survival lies a haunting reminder. The most profound stories are often not the ones that happened, but the ones that could never happen, constrained by circumstance, expectation, and the relentless weight of fame. They were two stars burning brightest for the world, yet destined to orbit one another without ever colliding. In the end, Elvis's admiration and Marilyn's struggle stand as enduring symbols of a universal truth. Sometimes, the world's brightest lights illuminate the deepest shadows, and some connections, no matter how real, are forever separated by forces beyond human control. Their story is not about romance, it is about recognition, empathy, and the tragic cost of being larger than life.